My daughter-in-law threw my belongings into the garage and moved her mom into my room, but she didn't know that. They did not even knock. She just walked in with her mother, holding a suitcase in one hand and a bottle of imported wine in the other, as if they were returning from some glamorous vacation. My son stood behind them, eyes fixed on the floor like a child caught stealing. I was folding his laundry, when she pointed to the door without even looking at me. "She'll take this room now. You can move your things to the garage. There's still space next to the tool shelf, the one with the rusted paint cans." My son said nothing, not a word. His silence hit harder than her commands. I stood there, holding a worn pair of socks that I had mended the week before. "Why?" I asked. Not in anger, just confusion. She turned, raising an eyebrow as if I had just spoken in a language too ancient to matter. "This room suits my mother better. At least she does not smell like menthol and World War II stories." She chuckled at her own cruelty. I felt something in my chest, not quite pain, not quite rage. It was quieter than that, duller. Like watching someone paint over memories with white paint, stroke by stroke, erasing you in silence. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. My name is Mandarin. I built this house with calloused hands and leftover change. After my husband died, I sold the only home we had known for 38 years to help my son start over in Boston. I never asked for anything, just a bed, a corner, a place where I could sit and drink my morning tea without hearing the word burden whispered through clenched teeth. But here I was, standing in a room that used to be mine, now filled with someone else's perfume and throw pillows. They had already cleared half the closet. My blouses hung lopsided, shoved into a cardboard box like forgotten merchandise. "Take your memories with you too," she added. "No one here needs to trip over the past." I stared at her. She wore my late husband's watch, a gift I had given him when our boy was born. It looked cheap on her wrist, like borrowed dignity. My son cleared his throat. "It's just until things settle down." "When?" I asked. "When I die." He said nothing. Again. I walked slowly to the corner where I kept my photo albums and an old cedar chest. Inside were pieces of a life they never cared to know: my wedding dress, faded now to ivory, a lock of my boy's baby hair, letters from my husband written in war-torn years. I packed them gently, not because I wanted to leave, but because I did not want them thrown away like I had just been. In the garage, there was a space between the water heater and the back wall. No insulation, just concrete and cold. I laid down an old rug, the one she said was too ugly for modern flooring, and I sat. That night, through the thin walls, I heard laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, and someone playing soft jazz. And in that moment, I remembered a promise my husband once made. When they forget what you gave, let silence remind them what you still hold. I said nothing, but I remembered everything. It was not always like this. There was a time my son used to ask for my opinion before buying a pair of shoes. A time he would sit on the floor beside me, head resting on my knee, and ask me to tell him the story of how his father once carried me across a river in the middle of a flood. He used to say, "Mom, if I ever marry, I want it to be like you and Dad." But things change. People change. Or maybe they just reveal themselves. I did not attend their engagement dinner. Not because I did not want him to be happy, but because I knew something he did not, or perhaps refused to see. She had a reputation, and not the kind that fades with time. She had been expelled from college for threatening a professor in front of an entire class. Not suspended, expelled. She smiled when she told the story to friends, like it was a trophy. "He disrespected me," she said, "so I made sure no one ever forgot me again." That was the first red flag. The second came when she told my son to stop calling me Mom in public. "It makes you look like a child," she said. "Grow up." I told him, carefully and without bitterness, that love is not just excitement and timing. Love is about building something, slowly, together. But he thought I was jealous. "You do not want me to move on," he said. "You want me to stay under your roof forever." That was the first time he raised his voice to me. I still remember sitting alone that night, turning over the words in my hands like broken glass, not sure which ones cut deeper. When they did marry, I still sent a gift. A hand-stitched quilt I had been working on for months. She opened it, held it up like it was something damp and smelly, and said, "What is this? A tapestry for the garage?" Even then, I tried. I baked bread, I stayed out of the way, I offered to pick up the dry cleaning when they got busy, but I could feel her resentment grow like mold in the corners. It was not about what I did or did not do. It was about who I was, someone she could not erase, but wanted to. A reminder that my son did not come from nowhere. And then, there was the other thing. Before my husband passed, he came home from work one day with a girl clinging to his hand. She was 6, thin, quiet, eyes like she had never been allowed to cry. He looked at me and said, "Her name's Marie. She's mine." I said nothing that night. I cooked dinner as usual, set the table, fed the child, put her to bed in the room that used to store Christmas decorations. Then, after everyone slept, I sat in the kitchen until dawn. I could have left. I could have screamed. But I thought of the child, innocent, unaware, and already abandoned once. So I stayed. For 3 years, I raised her as my own. No one in the neighborhood knew. I told people she was my niece from out of state. She called me aunt in public, mama in private. When her birth mother showed up with a new boyfriend and a court order, I gave her back, and I cried for days. Not because I lost a child, but because I had given my heart to a memory I was never allowed to keep. Years later, when Zara found out about Marie, she smirked at me over dinner and said, "Only weak women raise their husband's shame and call it loyalty. You are not kind, you are pathetic." My son said nothing. Again, she would mock my stories. "Here we go again," she would say, rolling her eyes. Another tale from the trenches. Another war widow speech. You really think anyone cares about letters written in ink that has already faded? She hated that I had a past that did not include her, that I had been loved before she ever entered our lives, that my wrinkles were not just time, but testimony. Once, when I brought out the box of letters my husband sent from overseas, she glanced inside, saw the faded stamps, and said, "You kept this? Why?" He cheated on you and brought home a souvenir with a heartbeat. That night, I sat in the garage long before I had been forced there officially and read those letters one by one. My husband never asked me to forgive him. He just kept writing about the weather, the food, the silence between mortar shells, about how he missed my cornbread, how he still slept with his hand curled like he was holding mine. I kept those letters because they reminded me of a man who, in his worst moment, still came home with the truth in his eyes. And I stayed, not because I was weak, but because I knew how strong forgiveness could be. But Zara, she only saw shame. She saw my past as a stain that refused to wash out. She once said, "You are the kind of woman who lets the world walk all over you and then calls it character. Me? I bulldoze." And so she did. She bulldozed into my life, into my family, into the room where my son once slept beside me when he was sick, and tore out every corner of softness like it was mold to be scrubbed. But the thing about women like me is when we bend, it is not because we are broken, it is because we are remembering how to stand. The invitation list was printed on glossy paper and taped to the refrigerator weeks before the event. My name was not on it. House anniversary, it said, in elegant silver letters. A year since they bought this house, my house, if one were to count the money, but I was to be invisible for the celebration. That morning, I woke early to bake cornbread, the kind my husband used to love, thinking maybe it could be part of the meal. I set it on the counter to cool. When I came back from folding laundry, the dish was gone. The trash bin smelled faintly of butter and cornmeal. I did not ask. I already knew. Around noon, I heard them moving furniture upstairs, laughing, dragging chairs, clinking glasses. The scent of expensive candles drifted through the air, vents something citrusy, sharp. not at all like home. I went to the door that led upstairs. It was locked from the other side. I turned the handle again, slowly, just to be sure. Nothing. The click was deliberate, not an accident. Through the door, I could hear her voice. Make sure no one goes down there. The garage smells like damp wood and sadness. It'll ruin the aesthetic. So I sat back on my folding chair, next to the boxes that still carried my handwriting, Christmas, old photos, his uniform. The light through the small window made everything look smaller, older. After a while, I heard footsteps. Soft, hesitant, then a knock. Grandma? It was my grandson. He could not have been more than 10. His voice trembled like he knew he was doing something wrong. He slipped through the narrow crack of the door, holding a small plate of cake with plastic frosting. I saved this for you, he whispered. Mom said you already ate, but I know you didn't. I smiled, though I felt the sting behind my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. You should go back before. The door burst open. His mother's voice was like cold metal scraping. What did I say about coming down here? She grabbed his wrist, yanked the plate from his hands, the cake splattering on the floor. She's my grandma, he cried. She's the past, she said, and we're not living in it. She turned to me, smoothing her dress like nothing had happened. We don't want guests to see the oldest part of the house. It ruins the mood. You understand, don't you? You always understand. Then she smiled and left, dragging him upstairs. The door slammed. The lock clicked again. I picked up the crushed cake with a napkin. The frosting left pink streaks on my fingers. It was supposed to be a celebration, and yet there I was sitting alone in a space that smelled of dust, paint, and betrayal. If I had known someone was watching from across the street, maybe I would have wiped my tears. Maybe I would have straightened my back and hidden the loneliness. But I didn't. Later I learned that the neighbor's daughter had been filming a family vlog that day. The camera caught a glimpse through their open garage door. An old woman sitting beside a pile of boxes, a paper plate on her lap, the muffled sound of music above her. Upstairs, laughter echoed, followed by applause. She must have made some toast about perseverance, or family, or love, words that fall easy from lips that have never tasted loss. I poured myself a glass of water and listened to their voices drift through the vents. My son's laugh, once full and genuine, now sounded like a man clapping out of obligation. Through the thin ceiling, I heard her say to a guest, I had to redesign everything when we moved in. The old woman's taste was rustic, that country kind of sad. I wanted something sleek, something that said, we made it. Another voice replied, and the garage? What's in there? She laughed. Oh, that's just storage. We keep the outdated things down there. The room erupted in polite laughter. The music played louder after that, maybe to cover the sound of their words reaching me. But they reached. Every syllable found its way down through the vents, soft and heavy like dust. I thought about going upstairs, standing in the doorway, and reminding them that I once scrubbed those very floors with my own hands. That the walls they bragged about painting white had been blue once, because blue made my husband feel calm after the war. But I didn't. I sat there and let the sound wash over me until I could almost believe it wasn't real. The garage light flickered, buzzing in rhythm with the laughter above. I looked around at the boxes, the shadows, the old photographs that smelled faintly of smoke, and told myself, this is just one night, one more insult in a lifetime of them. The thing about silence is that it starts small, but once it grows roots, it becomes impossible to kill. That night, I felt those roots dig deeper. When the party ended, I heard doors closing, heels clicking, cars starting outside. No one came down to say goodnight, not even my son. The next morning, I swept the crumbs from the floor, folded the napkin, and tucked it into my box, labeled Things Worth Remembering. Because someday, when they looked for the weakest link in the family chain, I wanted them to realize that the part they tried hardest to erase was the one still holding everything together. He was not a loud man, never raised his voice, even when the roof leaked or the car gave out midwinter. But when he did speak, really speak, it felt like a lesson being carved into stone. He had a way of making silence feel like a full conversation, especially after the war. There were days he would sit in his chair by the window and just stare, eyes fixed on something no one else could see. I used to ask what he was thinking. He would say, "I'm just remembering what it cost me to come home." His brother stole his land, 150 acres of timber and dreams, signed away while he was still overseas. The papers were legal, the betrayal was not. By the time he returned, it was too late to reverse anything. The lesson, he told me one night while tightening a bolt under the sink, is that trust without proof is a luxury you can't afford more than once. He taught me how to mend a pipe and read a contract. Not because he doubted me, but because he believed a woman needed to know the world's sharp edges, not just the soft ones. After he passed, I found myself reaching for his voice in small things, the way I folded bed sheets, the order I kept the pantry. But the most important thing he left me was not a habit, it was a sentence. Keep something they don't know you have. I never forgot that. When we sold the house, I did not just sign the check and trust the system. I kept copies. When I transferred my savings to help buy the Boston house, I did not wire the money blindly. I made sure the trail stayed in my name, that my part was recorded quietly, discreetly, but permanently. I printed every transfer, saved every receipt, and then I placed them all along with a notarized agreement we drafted ourselves into a small box of wood carved with an eagle. It was the same box that once held his medals. After he died, I folded his flag triangle tight and laid it inside. But over the years, the medals were put into storage, and the box became something else entirely. It sat beneath my bed, inside a canvas bag, under a layer of old clothes no one ever touched. Not because I was hiding something, but because I was preparing for something. I just did not know what yet. When I moved in with them, I brought only 4 boxes. That wooden one was the smallest, but the heaviest. No one asked what was inside. No one cared to. After they gave my room to her mother, I returned to that box like a woman revisiting a locked door in a dream. I pulled it from beneath the folded quilts and opened it slowly, like it might speak. Inside, everything was still there. The letter my husband wrote me before his last deployment. The copy of the deed from our first home. The bank statements. The signed transfer of $138,000 into Beckham's name, marked for joint home ownership. His signature, mine. And then, the certificate of deposit. 20 years, untouched, interest intact. It matured last spring. I ran my fingers over the edges of the paper, wondering what would have happened if I had been the kind of woman who threw things away once they became outdated. Maybe that is what she thought I was, disposable, an old drawer to be emptied when the paint dried. But I had been listening, storing, documenting long before she ever learned how to spell mortgage. Later that night, I waited until they were asleep and moved the box to the garage, tucked it behind the old dresser, under the loose floorboard. I replaced it with a decoy, another box, similar in size, filled with knitting yarn and torn family calendars. Just in case. Because something told me she would start snooping, the way she had eyed my photo albums, the way she asked, casually, if I had ever drafted a will, the way she had laughed when I told her I never signed anything I did not read. "Oh, please," she said. "Old people are always so paranoid." "No, dear. We are just prepared." I spent the next few days writing a list, names, dates, account numbers. Not because I expected a fight, but because my husband had been right. Proof is a language no one can argue with. It does not shout, it just waits, and then it speaks when called. In the garage, while they played music upstairs and poured cocktails in matching crystal, I sat with that box on my lap and whispered, "Thank you" to the man who had warned me decades ago. He had known what betrayal tasted like, but he had also taught me that quiet women are not weak. We are just careful. And now? Now I was ready. It started with a phone call I was not meant to answer. The landline rang while they were out, one of those spammy insurance numbers that most people hang up on. I almost did too, until I heard my name. And then, her name, followed by the word beneficiary. I stood still, holding the receiver so tightly my knuckles cracked. "Can you repeat that?" I asked. The woman on the other end hesitated. "Ma'am, this is just a courtesy confirmation. The change was submitted last quarter. Your new listed beneficiaries are. I hung up. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood, but I knew I had not. There was a buzzing in my ears, like when you realize you have been robbed, and the door was always unlocked. I walked straight to the folder in my sewing kit where I kept copies of my policies. Printed, signed, untouched. The original document listed my grandson as the sole recipient. It had been that way since the day he was born. My gift to him silent, steady, future-bound. But now, it had changed. I remembered the fall. 2 months ago, I slipped while taking out the trash. Nothing serious, but enough to rattle my knee. She offered to drive me to the clinic. Urgent care is faster, she said. They'll make you sign a few things to process the visit. Just standard forms. She handed me a clipboard with 6 pages clipped together. Sign here, here, and here. I'll handle the rest. At the time, I was too tired to argue. My glasses were foggy from the cold. I trusted her. I was foolish. That night, I pulled out old forms I had signed before the ones from my bank, my previous doctor, my will drafts. I laid them out side by side. The signature on the new beneficiary form looked like mine, but not quite. It was neater, smoother, like someone had practiced copying it. And not for the first time. I held both pages to the window, matching loops and pressure marks. There was no doubt. Someone had traced my name from an old document, the kind of mimicry a stranger would miss, but a mother would not. I did not cry. I sat very still for a long time. The next morning, I called the only person I still trusted in the legal world, my husband's old war friend, now a financial advisor for the state. He had helped us refinance once, decades ago, and had always sent a Christmas card, even after my husband passed. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call. I told him everything. My voice did not shake. He listened without interruption, then said simply, They underestimated you. He told me what to do. Gather evidence, keep everything, do not confront them, not yet. So I began. I photographed every document in my possession, the original policy, the altered one I requested from the company, the signatures from old checks, prescriptions, birthday cards I had written in the same hand for 50 years. I scanned the letter from the insurance company confirming the change. I requested a record of the submission IP address, timestamps, office location. He helped me file the requests under a fraud protection clause. I took pictures of the garage too, not because it was evidence, but because it was context. What kind of person locks their mother-in-law downstairs while they host garden parties upstairs? I wrote everything in a notebook, dates, conversations, even the time she once casually said, Do you ever think about updating your will? Old ones can get confusing. I began keeping that notebook in my pillowcase. There was a morning, not long after, when she came down and found me writing. She laughed. What is this, a diary? You planning to publish it after you die? I smiled. Maybe. She rolled her eyes and left. But she checked the drawer that night. I watched her shadow through the gap under the door. She did not find it. She had no idea I was already halfway through building a case, that I had mailed copies of every key document to my lawyer, that he was quietly preparing a legal complaint while they planned their next vacation. In this house, they had music, mirrors, monograms, but I had paper, I had patience, I had the truth. And now, I had something more dangerous than any threat. Proof. All I had to do was wait. Let them think they had won. Let them decorate over the rot. Because the thing about forged signatures is that ink may dry, but intent never does. And no amount of white paint can cover a lie if the light hits it just right. I never thought a bowl of rice porridge would come back to me like this. Not through flavor or memory, but through a knock at the garage door one morning, soft, cautious, almost familiar. She was taller now, wearing a press badge on her jacket and holding a folder in one hand, but I recognized her eyes before anything else. Wide, brown, a little too serious for someone her age. The last time I saw her, she was 6, clutching her mother's hand, barefoot on our porch in the middle of a thunderstorm. Her mother had collapsed from pneumonia. They had no money, no insurance, and nowhere else to go. I brought them inside, sat them by the stove, boiled water, cooked plain white rice, stirred slowly, added salt and just enough ginger. That bowl of porridge kept them steady through one of the hardest weeks of their lives. I never told anyone. I did not do it to be remembered. But she remembered. Now she stood before me, saying, "I think I owe you a story." She pulled out her phone and showed me a grainy video, me, sitting in the garage with a paper plate next to boxes in silence, while music floated down from the party above. The image was brief, almost an accident, caught by a neighbor's daughter who had been vlogging that day. I saw it online. Someone asked in the comments, "Who lets an old woman sit alone in the garage during a party?" I did not answer. She continued. I started digging. Property records, insurance filings, tax forms. Then I saw your name, and I remembered you and my mother crying into your lap. She asked if I would speak on record. I said no. Then I said yes, not for revenge, but because silence, when swallowed too long, begins to rot the soul. She came back 2 days later with a small crew. Just her, a cameraman, and a microphone that trembled slightly in her hands. We filmed in the garage. I sat in the same chair, beside the same boxes. This time, I faced the camera. I told them about the party, the locks, the altered insurance forms. I showed them the receipts, the letters, the folder of evidence I had copied and mailed. I spoke slowly, not with anger but with weight, like every word had been waiting in line for decades to be spoken. She named the segment "The Mother in the Garage." It aired 2 nights later on the local station, Boston Prime Time. At first, it was just a few hundred views, then thousands. Then national outlets started calling. People shared it not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. A woman wrote, "I put my mother in assisted living because I thought I had no choice. Now I wonder if I even asked what she wanted." Another said, "I watched this with my daughter. We cried together." It became more than a story. It became a mirror. Within 48 hours, the Office of the Attorney General for the state contacted me directly. The lawyer I had been working with had already submitted the fraud complaint. Now, they were adding elder abuse, financial exploitation, and psychological coercion to the list. The investigation began quietly, but quickly. They subpoenaed records from the clinic where I had supposedly signed those forms, compared timestamps, analyzed signatures. My lawyer sent over every item we had cataloged. And through it all, I said nothing upstairs. I cooked my meals, I swept my corner. I smiled when she walked past, never letting on that every moment she breathed easy was a gift from my patience. But things began to change. People at the school where she volunteered stopped speaking to her. Invitations dried up. Neighbors who once waved began to cross the street instead. She did not know why. She thought it was gossip. She thought it would pass. Then she saw the broadcast. I heard the scream before the door even opened. She rushed down into the garage with her phone in hand, face pale, voice shaking. You set me up." I looked up from my knitting. I told my story. That is all. She cursed. She cried. She begged. And when none of it moved me, she threatened. "You think people care because you're old and pathetic? You think that makes you believable?" I said nothing. Because the thing about truth is, it does not need to shout. It only needs to survive long enough to be heard. The camera caught me in the worst moment of my life. Alone, diminished. But it also captured something they never expected, that quiet does not mean defeated. That sitting still is not the same as surrendering. And most of all, that sometimes justice begins with a knock on a garage door and the memory of a bowl of warm porridge. The courtroom smelled like paper and stale coffee. I sat in the second row, my back straight, my hands folded on my lap, not because I wanted to appear dignified, but because my husband used to say, "Don't let them see you fold, even when they break your bones." The judge wore glasses too large for his face. He looked like a man used to listening to liars and paperwork more than people. But he looked at me differently, with something that felt like recognition, like maybe he had seen his own mother in someone's garage once and never forgave himself. They sat 2 rows ahead, my son, and the woman he built a life with, from borrowed charm and staged perfection. He wore a suit he never could have afforded without the down payment I gave to help buy this house. She refused to take off her sunglasses, even in court. When the judge called the case, my name sounded strange coming from his mouth, as if it no longer belonged to someone who folded laundry in silence, as if it now carried weight. The opening arguments were clinical. My lawyer outlined the financial transfers, the falsified insurance records, the history of psychological coercion. He did not need drama. He had facts, timelines, signatures, digital footprints, emails, copies of the policies I had stored for 20 years. The file was over 2 inches thick. Their lawyer tried to object. "This is a family matter," he argued. "A misunderstanding." The judge raised one eyebrow. "Fraud is not a misunderstanding." The video clip was played, the one from the garage, me sitting with my paper plate as laughter echoed above. I did not watch it. I watched them. Her face tightened, his shoulders sank, and then, the moment of truth. They introduced the handwriting expert. She pointed to 2 versions of my signature. The one on the policy change form was traced, with 96% confidence. My son looked at the floor. She looked at him. And just like that, the beautiful illusion cracked. When it came time for them to speak, she refused. "This is slander," she whispered. "None of this is real." He stood, barely. His voice broke before his second sentence. I thought she wouldn't notice. We were just trying to secure the future." The judge leaned forward. "By erasing hers?" The verdict came quickly. First, a restraining order. They were forbidden from contacting me for 5 years. No calls, no visits, no letters. Not even through my grandson. Second, financial restitution. The court acknowledged my majority contribution to the house. I was awarded primary ownership. They had 30 days to vacate or purchase my share outright at full market value. Third, an ethics referral. She was removed from her board position at the local school district, pending further investigation into her conduct. That night, I watched the lights upstairs stay on late into the night. I did not need to listen to know what was being said. Accusations, panic. Blame passed like hot stones between people who used to toast to unity. By morning, her mother was gone, took the guest room sheets, the wine glasses, and her silence with her. No note, just absence. 2 days later, my son knocked on the garage door. He did not come inside. "Mom," he said, "I know I don't deserve anything, but I need to say I'm sorry." I opened the door, stood in the threshold. He looked older. Not in his face, but in his eyes, like someone who had just realized the cost of comfort. "I should have stopped it," he said. "I should have protected you." I waited. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "You were right about everything. About her, about me." And then he asked, "Can you forgive me?" I looked at the boy I once rocked to sleep, the man who had let my dignity be boxed up next to lawn tools, the son who had watched it happen and said nothing. "You once told me I was a burden," I said. "Maybe not in words, but in actions." He nodded. "Then from now on," I said, "learn to carry the weight of your choices. That's what grown men do." I did not slam the door. I just closed it slowly, not with rage, but with finality. He stood there for a few minutes more, then left. I watched him walk away, and for the first time in years, I did not feel smaller. I felt steady, rooted, like the kind of woman who remembers everything, even when no one else does. The news ran the story again that night, this time with an update. The mother who was once locked in a garage now holds the title to the home, and the silence she once kept has become a voice for thousands. Comments poured in from strangers. One said, "My mom cried watching this, so did I. We're calling her tomorrow." Another, "She's the grandma I never had, but always needed." They called me brave, but I wasn't. I was just a woman who had been underestimated one time too many. They called me outdated. But they didn't know I remembered everything, names, papers, signatures, and I used every piece of it. The apartment is small. 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen that smells like lemons and sea salt. The windows face east, and if I rise early enough, I can watch the sun climb out of the Atlantic like it still believes in second chances. I do. It is not the kind of place people write postcards about, but it is mine. The lease is in my name. The furniture is second-hand, but I picked every piece myself. No one rolls their eyes when I hang up old photos. No one complains about the smell of menthol or nostalgia. He lives with me now, my grandson. His mother said no, said it would confuse him, make things complicated. The judge said otherwise. Said that stability lives where love is, not where power pretends to be. He sleeps in the room beside mine, and every night before bed, he knocks twice on the wall. Just a habit we made. 2 knocks. I'm okay. I knock back once. So am I. We started a blog together. He helps me with the typing, the formatting, the tech stuff, as he calls it. I tell the stories, the ones I never thought anyone would care to read. We called it From Garage to Justice. Each post begins the same way. This is for the quiet ones, the ones who remember everything and still choose kindness until they cannot. It started slow, a few clicks, a few comments, then it spread. Older women from Arkansas, single fathers in Ohio, teachers in Oregon, they wrote in, shared their own stories. Some had been forgotten by children. Some were caregivers themselves. Some just needed to hear that being invisible did not mean being worthless. One woman wrote, "I haven't spoken to my son in 12 years. After your story, I called him. He didn't answer, but I left a message. Thank you for reminding me that I still have a voice." Another said, "You're not just telling your truth, you're teaching the rest of us how to carry ours." I don't answer every message, but I read them all. With tea in one hand and my grandson snoring softly in the next room, I let those words fill spaces that silence had once rotted. The logo of the blog is a simple drawing one my grandson made on a tablet with his finger. It's the old knitted blanket they threw away the day I was moved to the garage, the one with frayed corners and mismatched colors. The one that covered his father when he had fevers as a boy, the one I had made with scraps during years when we had more winter than warmth. He remembered it, recreated it, said, "It should be our symbol," 'cause they thought it was ugly, but it kept people warm. He's right. We keep the original folded in a glass box near the desk, not to honor the blanket, but to honor the fact that things built with love outlast those built with money. People still ask if I've spoken to my son. The answer is no, not because I'm angry, but because I have nothing left to explain. He chose silence when I needed voice. Now he must live in the quiet he helped create. And her? She lost more than reputation. She lost legacy. People remember, not the expensive dresses or the speeches, but the day she locked an old woman in a garage and called it aesthetic. She moved out of state, changed jobs. Some say she volunteers now. I hope she does. Redemption is possible, even for her. But it won't come from me, not in the form of forgiveness, not in the form of forgetfulness. I did not write this for vengeance. I wrote it so that other women, mothers, grandmothers, wives who kept the lights on with coupons and prayer know that we are not the scraps of the household. We are the thread. And no one notices the thread until it snaps. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would go viral on the internet for simply surviving, I would have laughed, said something modest. But now I understand. The world is hungry for quiet truth, for soft power, for proof that endurance is not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. And mine is simple now. I walk by the sea. I write. I teach my grandson how to listen, not just to me, but to the silences between words. That's where truth hides. I don't need apologies. I need peace. And I have it. Some nights, I sit by the open window, wrapped in that same old blanket, and think of all the times I almost disappeared from my own story. But I didn't. I stayed. I remembered. I spoke. And in the end, I wasn't the leftover piece of their home. I was the part they tried to throw away. But some things don't burn. Some things don't bend. Some things return, stronger than ever. Because anyone can discard a memory. But those who do soon find themselves living in a house without a soul. Thank you for staying with me through every word, every wound, and every moment of quiet strength. This wasn't just my story, it belongs to every soul who's ever been silenced, dismissed, or told they were too old to matter. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think of your own mother, grandmother, or even yourself, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories for more real stories from the women the world tried to forget until they remembered themselves. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we tell the truth. And the truth has a long memory. Thank you, my dear. I'll see you on the next porch.